I love animals. I live my life chasing after the wind. I've never found what I've been searching for. But in the wind, in the rain, in the little things in Africa, in my heart, in my life, here in my home in Africa. The sun still rises, the forest comes to life. The land rings out nature rises, the drums their voice to sound. Here I see, singing has come again.
I've run through sorrow, been told to never give up. I've seen the silence surrounding me, but in my heart, in my soul, my faith is strong, my hope still grows. In my life and in my heart, I know the best is yet to come.
The sun still rises, the forest comes to life. The land rings out, nature rises, the drums their voice to sound. Here I see, singing has come again. Come alive, awake all nations, come together, life will bring a better day. Come alive, come alive, come alive, come alive. The sun still rises, the forest comes to life. The land brings out nature rises, the drums their voice to sound. Here I see, singing has come again. The sun still rises, the forest chasing after the wind. I've never found what I've been searching for. But in the wind, in the rain, in the little things in Africa, in my heart, in my life, here in my home in Africa. The sun still rises, the forest comes to life. The land rings out, nature rises, the drums their voice to sound. Here I see, singing has come again.
I've run through sorrow, been told to never give up. I've seen the silence surrounding me, but in my heart, in my soul, my faith is strong, my hope still grows. In my life and in my heart, I know the best is yet to come.
The sun still rises, the forest comes to life. The land rings out, nature rises, the drums their voice to sound. Here I see, singing has come again. Come alive, awake all nations, come together, life will bring a better day. Come alive, come alive, come alive, come alive. The sun still rises, the forest comes to life. The land brings out nature rises, the drums their voice to sound. Here I see, singing has come again. The sun still rises, the forest comes to life. The land brings out nature rises, the drums their voice to sound. Here I see, singing has come again.
Good morning, everyone. That was the Ubuntu choir in Uganda, thanks to YouTube online. Shaelee was on here, and hey, there you are, you're back. I'm excited.
Yeah.
And I got little sleep last night. It's just like a regular permaculture convergence.
I know.
I was up till 2 a.m. and then now it is, it's 10 a.m. Florida time. And I've already been in contact with Penny Livingston and some others. She's gonna be on this morning. She's a great music person. And I found some amazing permaculture music. If you ever guys get the excitement to get on YouTube and just put permaculture music, there's some amazing permaculture songs from around the world. We're not even going to get to them all, but I just threw up one of my favorites, and I hope you guys appreciated that. And good morning, Shaelee. How did you sleep?
You asked me right when I drink my tea.
Okay.
I slept pretty well. We had a nice late conversation, and then I had to spend some more time with my kids. So I don't think I got to bed till, I don't know, 1 something, 2. I got to get up at the bright early hour of 6:30. I was thinking how fun it is that we're getting to have some of those convergence experiences that I kind of like in this weird sort of way, like not getting enough sleep, having late night conversations, and and then there's rain this morning, and that seems to be something that often happens where there's an unforeseen storm or a rain episode, and then we have to navigate that.
Yes, totally.
People might notice that I'm not in a normal place. I'm in the upstairs of a barn because it's the only place that we have good internet where I live. So I had to get my tea and get all ready and then tromp through the farm in the rain to get here. So it very much reminded me of other morning circles where I have to drag myself up and
And you with tea reminds me of it, because you're always the tea connoisseur and provider. And so I wish I had some of your tea, but actually when I get a break, I'm going to go make myself some tea and, in honor of Shaelee. So anybody else have any memories from permaculture convergence of the past that they appreciate in the morning? We only got 7 of us right now.
Julie Wolf, welcome. Good morning. Oh, it's your name tag from your first convergence, right?
Aw.
That's
Hello.
wonderful.
Good morning,
Hi
Becca.
there.
Hi, Becca.
Hi. Well, it's not morning for me. I'm in Rishikesh, so it's evening time for me. So I experienced no lack of sleep because it was morning time when I was on with you guys last night. So thanks for getting up early and making this.
Yeah, you can see the sun
Appreciate
rising.
it. I love the music.
Sun's
Yeah,
still rising.
I love seeing the window. I see Baba G behind you, Becca.
Oh, it's a whole line of spiritual teachers there.
Nice.
I'd actually come over to India to meditate and came up to Rishikesh to meet Muji Baba,
Nice.
who was great. And I came for one day and I ended up staying for a month, and then COVID happened. So here I am. But it's a pretty cool thing because I'm a midwife, and I was introduced to 2 young couples who wanted to have a home delivery. So I'm helping them with that in October. So I think there's a reason for me being here.
Absolutely.
Becca, did you catch David's presentation last night about his time in India?
Earlier than this?
No,
I had. Oh yeah, I did. That was really cool. That was really cool. If I could travel, I mean, a lot of things are closed still. I mean, the borders are basically closed. So, and all the tourist sites are closed. Everything like that. So, I'm
But you can
staying
dream.
put. Yeah.
So you would like to visit those
I'm
places?
hoping by November I can leave, and then I'm going to head east, Thailand. So, but I liked hearing about was it that workaway? Because I've worked in France and Ireland doing woofing before,
Right.
and those were some cool experiences. One, I was on a duck farm, so.
Awesome. And is Renee or Deepaka interested in saying good morning? Or Jody?
It's Deepika, I'm
Deepika?
pretty sure.
Typica.
That's right. You guys are awesome.
Typica.
Good morning, guys. Some of you probably didn't get much sleep at all, did you?
No.
Yeah.
Who needs sleep?
Excited for another day. I'm going to be in and out, but I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say today.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate how this format gives us the grace to come in and out as we need to take care of our families. I love the permaculture ethic of inclusivity, and some years maybe that's been harder. And David, I see you squinting. I accidentally got on the wrong, my computer's restarting, so I'm on a secondary computer. Is my signal okay?
Yeah, it's actually flowing pretty well. It's about what it normally is. Yeah, it's actually working all right.
Okay, I'm hooked to a different router that I don't know if it is as fast, so it's all right then. Yeah.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, it's really good for both of you. Every once in a while I hear little pops. I don't know if that's on my end.
There's a really strong rain here right now. You might hear
wow.
that coming through with my signal.
And
Oh,
is,
I think I can see the rain out of your window, Shaelee. Oh my
Yeah.
God, somebody turned on the faucet in the sky.
It's true. There is a faucet in the sky. It's wonderful. My bedroom is in a little kind of really small. My bedroom is this 8x12 greenhouse type sunroom addition off the side of the tiny little building that I live in. And I love it because it has a glass roof, and in the rain, I can just see the drops pouring like with the stars on the other side. And
Wow.
sometimes it's weird like that when you can see the stars in the rain, but it's happened before, and it's amazing to have that like kind of beautiful, ethereal outside experience when in my nest. Yeah.
Thanks.
anybody
yeah.
else have anything they want to share? Good morning, Jennifer.
Is it Jody here?
Any other small group? We all made it. Yeah, one reason why I kind of volunteered to make sure we had a breakfast hour. Oh wait, from Jody. Hello from Burien. I just signed in and checking out, listening. This beautiful rain from your warm kitchen. That's wonderful. That is wonderful. Yeah, I thought it was so important, even with this online format, to have a circle for connection. And sharing drinks. It's true. One of my favorite parts of all these convergences has been the meal times and the tea houses and those campfires and those informal spaces, just to kind of share that aren't as structured and as serious. Because I think it's, you know, when we play and when we hang out, it's like when plants rest. When plants rest at night, that's usually when they grow in our physical body. At night, that's when we can heal. And it's in these kind of downtime places that we can do a lot of growth and a lot of good kind of cementing of the relationships we build and the things we learn. So yeah, kind of hard to organize a tea time space in a digital event, but this is as good as we can get. Yeah. And so I can't really access my big computer, but the point of the breakfast conversation was just to share some bits about cheese. I was hoping to record things and screen share like a cheese making process, but that part of my technology piece did not come together. So I will share about cheese making and some dairy kefir and all those sorts of tips. I believe that's on the schedule for this time block, unless somebody else wants to say something or steer that information in a certain way. I'm kind of low light too. There any?
Why don't you go ahead with that, Shaelee? And if you run out of time or have extra time, I can actually give a tour of my garden outside because it's
excellent.
right now. It's a small garden for a large-scale permaculture guy.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll keep on trying to figure out the screen share bit. Maybe I can do it with this computer at some point. All right, so a few home dairy cheese making tips. Or tricks, the things I like to do with milk. Is anybody in the room right now someone who has cows or goats or gobs of milk from time to time? No?
Wish I had goats.
No.
You did have goats?
I wish I had goats.
Yeah, well, let's keep on poking at Sahale about getting goats.
Yeah.
I grew up on a goat dairy, and we made cheese as a kid, and so I know how to make ricotta cheese like the back of my hand.
Wow.
Oh, cool. Yeah, you should, after or now or whenever, you can say if your method is any different. And yeah, Sahale's thinking of getting goats. And Becca, when you were speaking to Work Away, Kirsten and Marley, and was it
Mike.
you? Who was the other man? The other
Joshua.
person?
Let's see.
Joshua?
Mike,
No, there was someone
Joshua.
who logged in
Irene.
yesterday.
Yeah, we had a
The-
bunch of people from Sahale. We had Marley and Kirsten and Irene and Mike and
yeah, it was Mike. That was the other
Joshua.
person who did some stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David gave the presentation. David Stein.
Uh-huh. Oh, yes, but Sahale, they have a keynote tonight, and they are an excellent community that loves workaway people. If you feel like staying somewhere in the Northwest through a workaway for a few months when you travel back this way, they're a nice place to land that is registered on the workaway. I was just going to make that mention to you, Becca, and other people in our community that Sahale is awesome and is set up for that. Okay, so dairy stuff. There's a few really easy things you can make with milk, but it's important, it is critical that you do not use ultra pasteurized milk. If you get your milk from the store, make sure that at the most it's just pasteurized and not ultra pasteurized. Raw milk is best. And it can be good to kill the other bacteria in there, but with ultra pasteurized milk, the proteins in the milk are denatured to such a large degree that it will not make cheese. It might make okay yogurt, but it will not make cheese. So keep that in mind if you want to get into cheese making. You need to only get regular pasteurized or raw milk. With your raw milk, you can pasteurize it yourself and leave a lot of the good enzymes intact by heating it up to 135 and holding it there for half an hour. That is not very hot, but with the prolonged time of half an hour at 135, it'll kill all the baddies. So that's a good thing to remember. In that same regard, if you're making yogurt, it's good to sterilize your jars. And an easy way to do that is to just put all your jars, use some visuals, in your oven, shut the door, clean jars, put them in your oven, and leave your oven at like 150 for a half hour. And then all your jars will be totally dry. Your lids and your rings can be in there, and you can sterilize all your jars. That's a really nice, easy way to sterilize jars when you're doing a hot water canning bath for salsa or applesauce or whatever, one of those things that you can can, pickles. All right, so one super duper easiest milk product of all to make is kefir. You get a little thing. That's just gonna be my proxy, because a kefir globby looks kind of like this. This is actually a keychain, but kefir globs look like this. They're this little tiny lump of squishy bacteria and yeast, kind of like a globby huge booger or a funny lumpy kefir scoby. And they're tiny little, they call them kefir crystals or kefir granules, and it's this weird little bacteria yeast organism polyculture of interesting bacterias that hold together, that feed on milk proteins, and will inoculate your milk with great culture. I just love all these things. They have this power of culture. It's wonderful. A little bit of good culture can overtake everything and make something delicious. It's good to remember how we live our life. So with kefir, you take your little globby and you put it in your milk and swirl it around, and you let it sit on your counter overnight. Usually it's really this kind of finessing of how big and strong your culture is to the quantity of milk. If you have a really healthy, strong culture, that kefir granule can turn a whole quart of milk into a quart of wonderful kefir in as little as 6 hours. If you have a ill-fed kind of sad little kefir, you need to put that in, say, a quarter cup of milk, and it might not even work, but if you put in new milk every 6 hours and just keep changing the milk and believing in the inherent culture of your kefir, it will get healthy, and within a week you'll see your milk start to kind of solidify or get thick after 6 hours. Once your milk has gotten thick, you put it in the cold. It will take another 24 hours to really get that nice, like, you know, you buy kefir somewhere and it has this wonderful creamy pourable texture. That takes more time. So it has to be out on the counter. I believe kefir's preferred temperature is about 70 degrees. I think it's like 65 to 75 degrees, something that those bacteria and yeast prefer to grow. And so, yeah, it sits there, and then in the fridge, they have this chance to kind of thicken up. And I've done both, where I'll strain out the little globby and put it in new milk and then transfer that kefir to the fridge and then get my next batch going. And you can also leave your kefir globby in the fridge with milk if you say want to take a break from making kefir, and you can just let that kefir in the milk kind of sit in there for a week or so, and then use it again. It can sort of eat all the proteins around it and need a little bit of tender loving care before it wakes up again, with that just believing in the process, giving it fresh milk every 6 hours, and just keep on renewing the atmosphere, and it should wake up even if it's been sort of in hibernation. I've frozen kefir globbies too, and it can take a bit of time for them to, I just call it waking up, being regenerated, but they'll do it. Kefir is rad because if you do have a home dairy, like I have had goats for a little over 9 years now. They've been a fairly constant part of my life. There's maybe 3 months out of the year, most years, that I haven't had milk, but otherwise I'm getting somewhere between, I don't know, about a quart and 2 gallons a day from the goats I have. Right now I have one dwarf Nigerian goat, and I'm getting a half a pint a day because she's so tiny and wasn't necessarily handled for milking early in her life. But the nice thing when you have too much milk is that kefir is such an easy process. It takes, 30 seconds every day, and you can have tons of milk or tons of kefir. I really enjoyed mixing it with fresh berries and kale from the garden into a smoothie. I got a great deal at Country Air, our natural food store, one year on frozen cranberries. And I believe one of my favorite smoothies was a cranberry kale kefir smoothie. It was sour and green and amazing. But because of that, I was able to live this dream of only eating things that I produced mostly. I guess it wasn't that time, but it was this period of my life where I was like, can I go for at least a month of only eating things that I have raised on this land? And kefir made it totally possible. I could do kefir and kale and blackberry smoothies. That was that iteration. And then I could have greens and duck eggs and hot sauce with some chilies I made. And if you want to eat what you produce, depending on something simple like kefir and a bunch of greens and eggs, is the easiest year-round, most sustainable way to try to grow all your own food, because those are things that you can get every single day, kind of no matter where you live. With a little bit of tools, you can have greens. They're a great source of protein. You can probably have eggs, and you can have certainly goat milk in most parts of the world, or with a goat milking cooperative in your area. People might be into it. Okay, so next is yogurt. It is up a degree in complication, but not so bad. Those bacteria prefer to live in the, 90 to 110 range. That is their preferred spectrum of life. You can make yogurt by buying a handy dandy little jar of yogurt from the store, as long as it is unflavored and unsweetened, plain yogurt. You can also, and this is my favorite thing to do, go to a cheese making supply, and in this digital age, they're all over the internet, and you can buy a handy little package of culture. It's powdered culture, and it's amazing for making cheese and yogurt. In this situation, you can take your fresh, raw, well-handled milk, just sprinkle in maybe about a quarter of a teaspoon is enough for a gallon. So whatever amount you do, that's a quarter teaspoon or less is all you would need. You stir it in really slowly, or sometimes I would use a whisk, and then you get a little fluffy thing on the top, but it makes it easy. And then you let it sit at that degree, 90 to 115. If you have a huge dehydrator, it's really easy to have big glass jars in your dehydrator, set it at 95 degrees, and walk away for 6 hours. That was my favorite. Other ways to do this are to use canning jars in a big cooler and fill that cooler with water and let it sit in a bathtub somewhere where it doesn't get disturbed overnight, and that'll inoculate your milk. I have heard of people using an oven and putting them in the oven. on warm till it heats up and going away. And that's another way to inoculate your milk. So yogurt, it's the same as kefir. It wants that time to incubate. 6 hours is usually good. You can do it longer, up to 12, depending on how hot it is. And then it needs to go in the fridge to get hard. And if you do something like this, are you thick yet? And you shake it, your cream and your whey and the proteins will usually separate in the milk. So I've had that happen when I've made cheese, is that I accidentally disturbed it while it was being cultured. This person, oh good. I want to say your name right. So please be patient with me as I get through it. Dipika, yeah? Is that?
Yep, that's right. It's like Topeka, just with a D.
Okay, Dupika. Yeah. Thank you for being patient with like things. Dupika. I'll write down the phonetic. Okay. Yeah. So you've done it in the oven before. Do you put it on warm to heat up and then turn it off?
No, so I just bring my milk to a boil and then I let it cool for a little bit. So, you know, you get sort of frothy on the top. At the top, we usually have like, you know, sort of from family to family, we pass the culture around. So I have a little bit of pre-made culture. I mix it into the milk and then I basically just put it in my oven and I turn the light on. That's it.
Oh, you turn the light on.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
And that seems to work
just fine. With the light on. I tried it with heating my oven up with warm and then coming and then kind of turning it off. And I think that made it too hot. And if milk gets too hot, it'll separate.
So it helps a little bit, right? With the light, it just stays sort of that constant temperature. And depending on how cool it is, you can sort of put it closer to the light or a little bit further away. And so that's sort of how I manage it.
That's good. Yeah, that's a really like low tech, attainable way to make yogurt. And when you have a quantity of yogurt, so it needs to go to the fridge to get firm, and then you can go ahead and add, if you want to, you can add like yogurt, or then you can add honey or berries or some preserves you may have, those sorts of things. You heated the milk before putting it. Yes, you can. You heat the milk before putting it in the oven. Your milk needs to be at least 90 to 110 degrees for the yogurt culture to grow. You can, if you leave it lower, it'll take more time. The hotter it is, the quicker it is as far as the culture growing. But if it's too hot, it can separate. I believe it's at 117 degrees that's the, what is it? It's the bifidus and the lacto. There's the thermophilic and the mesophilic. It's the mesophilic cultures that are in yogurt, and they die at 117. Cheese making and all the dairy products are kind of fun because there's this very clear science of what bacteria are growing in the milk, what temperature do they love to grow in, and what temperature will they die at. In more of the complicated cheddars, you can have a mix of these thermophilic bacteria, which like it hotter. That's for your hard cheeses. And you kind of play with the way you carefully raise the temperature of your milk, knowing that these certain cultures that have these flavors will thrive here. If I heat it to this temperature, I can encourage the growth of these other strains, and they will make my cheese have these flavors. And with that, you can develop a Parmesan and harder cheese. Hello, good morning. Seeing people join in. Conversation right now is on home dairy cheese, kefir yogurt. I'm fielding the questions over here too. Okay, so we went from kefir to yogurt, some easy cheeses to make. Is there any more yogurt questions from anyone, or comments or tips on either of those two? Okay, another word about culture is you may be able to just ask in one of your free groups or community pages, does anyone have a kefir globby or a home culture for yogurt? And there's a good chance you'll have a neighbor who's been making these sorts of things who will be very happy to share with you. All right, so yes.
Could you say something about using coconut milk and making coconut milk yogurt?
I have not made
Have you
coconut.
done that?
I have not made coconut milk yogurt, but my neighbor on the farm here, Julie has a visual.
I'll tell you my story about my kefir when you're ready with coconut milk.
Yeah. I was just going to say that my neighbor makes coconut milk kefir and lives on it. He's a Harvey, I think, is 73 now, and is a huge proponent of his coconut milk kefir. And he uses it from a can and doesn't have a globby or anything. He just takes a small spoon of his last coconut milk kefir, puts it in a new can of coconut milk, swirls it around, leaves it on his counter, puts it in his fridge, and it's one of those like things that he lives on. So that's a Harvey trick. How do you make it, Julie?
Well, about 4 or 5 years ago, someone gave me a little, gave me a little tiny kefir gran. I like your term. I've never heard of it, globule. And so at first I was just putting it in milk and letting it culture, and it was great. And then a piece fell off, and so I thought, well, let me try a piece in coconut milk, and it worked. And then I tried to keep the two separate, and at one point I got mixed up, and I could switch the kefir grain back and forth between milk and coconut milk. And it's interesting to hear you talk about that you have to feed it, and if you need to take a rest, you can freeze it, or you can take a week off. Well, I've taken months and years off, and I can still eat this stuff. It's like cheese now. I mean, it's thick, like it's lost water.
Mm-hmm. You have a globby of culture in there too, right? Like, do you have a?
I was thinking I would show you guys. I put it in this. I guess it must have been like a silk tea bag or something, and so can you guys see that?
Oh,
I can kind of grab the string because I kept losing them, which is, I guess, I guess it's fine if you end up swallowing some of the globbies. You can give. It's
kind of disturbing if you chew them on accident.
Yeah, they're thick. They're kind of right. But I mean, I suppose it doesn't hurt you health-wise. Anyways, I'm pulling this out, and there's all this. Let me move my keyboard. Using my keyboard. Anyway, so I thought I'd share with you live, spontaneous. We don't know what'll happen.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. I was hoping to have some. Yeah.
Now that whole thing is not a globule or kefir grain. That is in the bag. So if you want, I brought a strainer and I can go wash it off and show you on a dark plate what the globule looks like. Because that's probably full of kefir, whatever you want, coconut cheese. This is coconut milk, and it tastes fine. It's amazing.
Yeah, cool. We can imagine too. What's in there? Yeah, Julie. Next time I see you, I would love to get a little globby for you. Mine went the way of something else, and it's so neat that you have one that is kind of. It's been cultured. It's been adapted to grow really well in both the milk, coconut milk, or dairy. Yeah. Because sometimes it's not like that. So it's fun. That's another real fun about wild ferments and kind of proliferating your own culture, because it loves where you live and the milk you give it, and every kind of living thing adapts to its surrounding. So any culture, like kefir culture you get, is probably a little bit unique. That's a really fun kind of mystery and fun about kefir. With yogurt, if you have a family strain of yogurt like the Kika, that's one where, you don't necessarily know what's in there, but you know it's good. A lot of the commercial ones have been tested. So you have this big list of, here's the 7 cultures in here. And you can find like, oh, I know I want this certain bifidus, whatever, for your gut health. And you can find the yogurt that has that strain in it. There's a question. And thank you, Sylvan. I appreciate that you put the pronouns you prefer and where you're from. That's a really nice thing to do in our name that I haven't seen anybody do yet. So thank you for that. What is the difference?
The dance community uses that. We've been doing online dances, and that's
I've always been so into the dance community, but ever since we went digital, I just have not been able to do it, but maybe I'll try. It's just not the same. Okay, but maybe it's still good. All right, so what is the difference between kefir and yogurt? Texturally, kefir has a lighter, more liquid, drinkable texture. Yogurt is thicker. It's also a different bacteria type culture, yeah? And it's also a temperature range. The bacteria and yeast in kefir grow and proliferate around the 70-degree range, which is awesome because you can make it on the counter. Yogurt needs 90 to 110, 115 degrees to grow. So those, like, you could not make yogurt on your counter. It needs a little bit warmer than that. Yeah. So similar to yogurt, which are all called mesophilic cultures, are chev and feta. They are really easy, super delightful cheeses to make. For those, you heat up your milk. If you buy like regular pasteurized milk in the store, you don't need to pasteurize it again. So if you have really clean materials, put like whatever, half gallon, gallon in a big pot, bring it up to 100 degrees. And then again, I prefer to buy a packet of Flora Danica is probably my favorite tasting of all the cheese cultures you can buy online, but there's a lot of different mesophilic yogurt cultures or cheese making cultures. They're fairly similar in that you could even use yogurt for making chev or feta, honestly. And in that case,
something
mesophilic.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a term to describe the different lactobacterias that live at a certain temperature. There's another term called thermophilic, and it's the higher temperature. I don't know the root Latin, what the meso or thermo means. Does someone hear? Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Meso is middle.
Okay.
So a kefir would be a low temperature. Philic is loving. And thermophilic is heat loving.
Oh, so that makes sense that the thermophilic likes it hot and the mesophilic likes the middle range. Cool, yeah. Because I believe the thermophilic can live about 120 to maybe 130 degrees, and then they die. So that's pretty hot for a little bacteria to be living in milk and not being killed off. It's at 135 degrees. If that's sustained, all the bacteria dies, and then you have a really gentle form of pasteurization. So if you have like fresh milk and you don't know how it was handled and you're worried about being bacteria, a really gentle way where you still leave the good enzymes intact, but you kill the bad bacteria is to bring something to 135 for a half hour. So you may want to do that, especially if you're trying to make like a cheddar or a more complicated cheese. Anything that ages should probably, like maybe you might want to pasteurize it because it's not because we want to kill the bacteria, but because it's really easy for your cheese to spoil if there's a little bit of a funky culture in there. Or you can add extra good culture to try to overpower the weird stuff, which is more my style. Just emphasize what I want and believe it will overtake the bad. All right, so back to the feta and chev process. They start out the same. You heat up your milk to around 100 degrees, put in your good mesophilic culture, or you can use yogurt. You could use about, for a gallon, I would say maybe a cup of plain yogurt. Stir that in and give it a half an hour for the culture to just do its thing and grow in this undisturbed, put the lid on, walk away, keep it warm. And during that time, get your rennet ready, which is a thickener. It's possible to buy animal-based rennet in tablets or liquid rennet. There's some that's derived from mushrooms. There's some that's derived from nettle. It's a coagulant, basically. Animal rennet is the lining of a new baby animal's stomach. And I guess the milk coagulates in the stomach. And sometime travelers figured that out when they used the stomach as a bag to like carry milk. They're like, hey, what happened? I can't drink this. So now we know it's there for making cheese. But anyways, you let your milk get cultured for a little bit. Then you dissolve your rennet in water. It's like a quarter cup of water, just a little bit, so that your rennet isn't too strong. Pour that in the milk, and then really carefully, it's great to have a big sort of like a really big spoon. I have a spoon that's about this big and is perforated with little holes. And with that, I can pour the rennet in the top and then really carefully push and move that milk around to distribute the rennet everywhere without having too much agitation. If I stir it really fast, it can do this thing where it's still swirling as it starts to coagulate, and the cheese can begin to kind of lose its integrity. The curd can lose its integrity. So once you add that once you add the rennet, you have to be gentle. Cheese making is this really slow, gentle process. So if you're kind of struggle with being too gung-ho and resting, some of us have that problem of just like, I got to do all these things. Making cheese is really awesome because it forces you to like heat up your milk really slowly and take all this time and just be really, really kind of sensitive with your process. So it's really refreshing. All right, so you really carefully, gently, slowly mix in your rennet, put on your lid, and then for Chev, you walk away for a whole day and you just let it do its thing. You let the culture keep growing. You let it get all like coagulating for at least 12 hours. And then you can come back in and use your cool perforated strainer and scoop out your curd into a mold. There's two ways to do this. I love ricotta molds. They're these neat little food grade plastic baskets that are exceedingly easy to clean. They're like a poly basket. Like I think they're food grade poly something. They have cool little round things. Like cheese making molds are wonderful if you get into it, especially if you're going to make a lot of Chev here. So you can use your ladle and scoop your curd gently so you don't make it fall apart and lose its integrity. And then you let it strain. You let it strain for another 12 hours. And all of that whey comes out, and then you'll have this nice little wonderful cheese that you can dump on a plate and roll in herbs, or you can mix in honey. There's so many things that you can do with a nice grip of Chev. If you don't have a ricotta mold, you can use cheesecloth or a hanky or any fine mesh basket with like maybe even a coffee filter in it. There's a lot of easy, innovative ways you can strain your cheese, but it needs to strain for a while. And the longer you let it strain, the thicker and more dense your Chev will be. Makes a great cream cheese substitute. Maybe a proxy for mayonnaise. I've made a cheesecake out of Chev. It's wonderful, all the things you can do with Chev if you have gobs around, and substitute it for other dairy products. Straining your yogurt in the same way that you strain your Chev creates another similar Chev-like product. A fun hiking trail food type adventure is to mix in herbs and spices and make a thin layer of Chev or Greek yogurt and dehydrate it. It's really yummy. I was inspired by a traditional Mongolian food called argul. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but the Mongolian travelers would take just plain like yak milk, let it separate, pull out the curds and dehydrate it. So that's a fun survival food, and you could take any cheese type yogurt thing and follow that same concept of dehydrating it into these crunchy little cheese globs, cheese crumbles that are surprisingly refreshing and yummy and tangy if you're in the middle of nowhere. All right, so how does feta deviate from Chev? Once you let your rennet coagulated milk thing happen, which takes about maybe 2 hours, an hour to heat up your milk, add the culture, half an hour to let it sit. Then you add your rennet and give that about an hour to coagulate. In feta, once you get to that point, you take a sharp knife into your pot and you cut at an angle like this all the way across. Then you cut at an angle like this. Then you cut at an angle like this, and then like this. And in your mind, imagine chopping that cheese curd into little 1/2 inch to 1 inch squares while it's still in the pot, while you're not disturbing it too much. And then you let it sit for a little while longer. Then you pull it out and strain it to get all the, maybe you let it sit for, say, an hour or so for feta. Then you can strain it with your strainer or in a bag. And you get a pretty good curd that's harder. The feta is harder because it's cut. And when you cut up the curd, you're allowing whey and temperature to get into the curd. And the more heat and time your curd has, the firmer it will get and more whey will be expressed out of those little curd culture balls. And so your feta, do that. And then after you have your kind of brick, you can pack it in salt water. I've packed it in olive oil and salt before, and it's great. Are there any other questions? Someone uses tofu mold. That's Sylvan. Thank you. That's great. That's for cheese. I mean, that's for for Chev. Word.
For Chev, it's a tofu mold is square, and all the cheese molds were round, and I didn't want round cheese because it doesn't fit on sandwiches and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I would make my Chev just a little bit firmer. I used it for lots of other kinds of cheeses as well, but a tofu mold is a wonderful little square thing. You can also make your own. When I first started making cheese, I took a yogurt container like this, and I pierced it all over. And I just
that's such a good idea.
With a knife, I punctured lots and lots and lots of holes in it, and then I would just dump my curd into that and put it in a pot and let the whey drain out.
Yeah, that's brilliant because that's essentially what a ricotta mold or a tofu mold is. It's a small plasticky container with lots of little holes in it. So
and I had lots of yogurt containers sitting around.
Thank
I have
you
a question
for
about feta.
Yeah.
Does it have to be aged?
Does what have to be aged? Chev?
Feta.
Feta. No. That's the fun thing about feta. It requires no aging at all. It's a fresh cheese, so it's ready in a day after you make it. It's similar to Chev in that beginning part. You cut it up so it gets a little firmer. Then you let it drain overnight like you would, and then you have a slightly firmer brick, or it's probably very similar to your slightly harder Chev. And then it's a little crumbly in texture, and you use it right away. You can age it. For an experiment, I took Chev, which I made little balls out of, and I rolled it in salt and packed it in a jar full of olive oil. I was inspired by someone said that they did this. Their family was from India, and it was something they had done with cheese. I'm not sure if it was feta, so I don't know if it's common there or not, but that's where I believe that method is from. And you can keep Chev for a long time, rolled in salt, packed in olive oil. I've tried that with the feta as well. Salt and olive oil will keep it for a long time. Or if you make a salt brine, you can keep your feta. I've had it for over 9 months in my fridge. So it's possible to age it, but totally not necessary. Feta is ready the next day. So you make feta today, you can eat it tomorrow. Yes. I haven't done this, but I think it would be fun to experiment by crumbling a little bit of blue cheese into a feta when you packed it away. I bet that culture would grow a little bit in that kind of airy spaciousness, and you could probably get a fun flavor. Or you could even just basically make blue cheese just by mixing a little bit of that into your feta, because some bacteria will keep on growing. The cheeses like a brie or a camembert, they have the blue cheese made me think of this because it's the same bacteria. A penicillin of sorts is in there, and they need, it's not the same, but it's a related bacteria. They need a kind of cave-like 60, 55 to 60 degrees to grow. And those are more complicated cheeses. Does anybody have any other questions about yogurt or kefir or chev or feta that has hopped in later? Does anyone else want to say good morning and share their drink? We have more people here. I see Julie. She's got her clean kefir, her coconut kefir. If anyone missed that exciting bit, she has a crossover of a kefir globby that fell in coconut milk that has been alive for years, can thrive with neglect, and is still delicious and thickening her milk. And we're getting the revelation on her screen right now if you switch to Julie Wolf.
So yeah, this is the little, because I kept losing the globules. Are you guys seeing me okay?
Yeah.
I ended up putting it in this silk, I guess it's some kind of a tea bag or something with strings. So I can grab I can use a fork and like you saw before, I don't know if any of you just came in and missed it, but I went into this jar and retrieved this, which was this big blob. It was like the coconut milk turned into cheese. And I've used the same kefir grain. I've mistakenly put it in milk. I tried to separate them, mistakenly put it in milk and then put it in coconut, and I went, whoops, and it worked. And that was years ago, that mistake. So I can go back and forth. And Shaelee was saying how this is great because I have my own, what's the word, hybrid? Kefir, culture. How did you say that?
What?
It's
I don't know.
It's own
a crossover.
wild,
That's wonderful.
yeah, crossover. So anyways, this little silk bag has been great. It's mostly prevented these things from escaping, these little globules. And now I've washed it off and I can reveal it for you so you can see what a globule looks like. So here we go. I had like maybe a 20th of this to start with. It was so tiny that a friend gave me like 5 years ago. And that's what we have now. Like one of these little things is what a friend gave me. One of these tiny, I don't know if my camera's showing it close enough. So that's what's happened in 5 years is I have a whole bunch of little grains.
I'm writing into the chat some of these tips because I so appreciate what you have shared too, Sylvan. And I don't know how to spell perforating, people. I'm sorry about that. I can figure it out. So you can just give it the spell, underlining it. I can't figure out the right combination. It's so humbling when you can't even figure out the right combination to let the autocorrect fix your word. Sometimes. Okay, if you missed the tips from Sylvan, I'm writing in the chat, is using a yogurt container and just poking holes in it to make a mold, or using a tofu mold, as it is square. That's wonderful. A few things about the chats from all the sessions. Welcome people who weren't a part last night, if that's a thing. We have in our Slack group a 2020 notes channel where we're copying all these chat notes and putting it into that Slack group. Slack is a digital messaging, sharing files, sharing ideas tool, kind of like any chat room that you would have, but it's just for the Northwest permaculture community. And any one of us in Slack can create a channel around an idea. If you wanted to just talk about cheese making, we could have a cheese making channel and you can make it, or any of your projects. Oh, okay, Julie, that's kind of hard to see. But if you look at Julie, she's got a kefir globby on her hand.
It's just, I'll put it back on the plate. That is one granule.
Can you squeeze it like this? Can you squeeze it like this so we can see it, or put it on the? That might be easier with the.
It's pretty tiny.
Oh yeah.
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 But that's
I've had
years of reproducing globules or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, I've had them be as big as a large grape too. So they can get rather spacious.
Oh, wow. That must be a different micros. I'd love to see
Yeah,
a
it
big
must
one.
be. I don't. I feel like I probably have a kefir globby somewhere in my fridge or freezer if I dig around. I'm a lucky person. I can find one.
So my
I might have to.
question, if I could I ask my question about my kefir?
Yeah, please do.
It you talked about like how to recover weak ones, which I mean these could be weak. Like if I tried putting these in milk, it might, have trouble or something. So yeah, I'm interested in recovering those. I think your recovering a weak one tips are going to be really useful.
Mm-hmm. For sure. It's actually the same process that I use to make a sourdough starter or recover a sourdough starter. I had a sourdough starter that was in my fridge for months, and the jar, it was a jar like this. It was all purple and dried out and crazy, and I was able to dig through all of that insanity and get like one little spoon of something that seemed reasonable in the middle. And I made really good bread out of that. And the method was the same. It was taking a little bit of fresh material, and then every maybe 6 hours, in the case of kefir, it's taking your globbies, and then every 6 hours, new milk. Dump the old stuff. It probably doesn't taste good. It's probably watery. Whatever is up. I mean, you don't have to dump it. You could fertilize with it or give it to a pet. But then after a few days, what the spark of life in there appreciates the new food and the new environment, and it will be healthy. So it's just trusting that process and giving it fresh sugars and proteins to eat. It was the same with the sourdough. I took that little glob and I put it in half a cup of fresh rye, ground up rye, and half a cup of fresh water, and just every day take a teaspoon or like a tablespoon of my culture, or 2 tablespoons with that fresh grainy water mix, and just keep on changing it, the culture and the fresh, and then it gets good.
Yeah, I think the whole topic of recovering things, I ignored my is a good one. I ignored my SCOBY in my kombucha for all of last year, and half of this one, and somebody asked for one at Sahale and a workaway, and I retrieved it at one of them out of a hotel, where SCOBY hotels, where you collect the extras because you get lots of those. And it grew colored stuff, blues and things like that. And I said, no, but I ended up actually recovering it. I was able to recover it with a couple of cultures, and washing the jar and washing everything with vinegar. And anyways, recovering our culture is a really good topic, actually.
Yeah. And one more thought about the sourdough. It's not really 6 hours for sourdough. It's more like that's in a really hot place. If you're colder, any culture, the hotter it is, the quicker it grows. For as far as food is concerned. Maybe it's the same with people, because we all kind of get sequestered in our little pockets when it's really cold and culture doesn't grow as fast. Not sure about that. But with sourdough, it's more like 2 days that you let it go. And just on the sourdough note, you can totally make your own sourdough out of anything. One of my favorite bread type things, I can't remember what it's called right now, but it's an Ethiopian flatbread that's made out of teff flour that's been fermented. It's so wonderful. It's like a pancake of fermented teff that turns into, it's very much like a Swedish pancake actually, but it's a fermented teff Swedish pancake, and they're wonderful. Sorry, I don't remember what it's called right now, but I recommend taking whatever grain you like and make sourdough out of it. Just add fresh water, maybe fresh grapes or some sort of wild fruit that has yeast on it. But you can just use an organic grain that's been ground up add water, let it sit for a couple of days, and then the next day take a portion of that, like half of it, and add fresh water and grain. Wait 2 days, take a portion of that, next day add fresh water and grain, and you'll have a bubbling, healthy sourdough culture out of any grain of your choice in about a week. There's an excellent book called Nourishing Traditions. I don't know if any of you know of that book, but it's wonderful and has a lot of great, see some hands up. I got that when I was a late teen and it rocked my world. But it has some awesome fermenting basics. We have a question. Can you dry kefir granules like you dry yeast? I don't know. I haven't tried that. I imagine that if you carefully dried them and kept them frozen, like cheese cultures, because they do have a living bacteria yeast combos in there that need to be nurtured a little bit to be able to be active. So if you could freeze dry them, I bet they could live in a freezer. Or if you carefully dried them at a low temperature, not too much, so that they still had enough of a spark of life, they could probably be rehydrated. But that would be fun to try. Maybe, Julie, you could dry a little bit and mail it to me. All right. Then I can see if I can wake up a globby. I bet if you dried a globby and then I put it in fresh goat milk every day for a week, I think I have faith in the culture and the process that it would, even if it had lost its original bacteria, it would just like suck it what it needed out of the atmosphere and put it in my milk. Okay, I heard the 8 o'clock bell, which I think means that we are going to transition into our opening circle hour. Are there any more milk? Kefir can be purchased as a powder. Thank you for that tidbit, Bird. So yes, that can be done as a thing. I wonder, injera. Thank you, Darcy. Yes, that's what that Ethiopian flat, thank you for helping me find that word. It's so good. And I hope that you try to make it. You can buy organic teff flour fairly easy from wholesalers like Azure Standard if you can't find it in your community. Like you get little tiny bags from Bob's Red Mill, but Azure Standard is a nice bulk order, really cool ethics as a farm. And they have bulk grains for pretty inexpensive and support little organic.
Before we go, I just want to remind everybody that this chat is going to be in Slack or Discord. The links to those are on the website, northwestpermaculture.org. And to continue this conversation, which every conversation needs to be continued, let's meet over there. And we're going to do more of this, right? Every meal, or almost every meal, Shaelee, we're gonna talk, have more talks like this, right?
Yeah, on the schedule, there's a kind of a conversation pegged to almost all the meals, so that we can do this kind of nice conversing around a topic. That's been a favorite part of the Convergence, is more those, I don't know, those informal spaces to talk, to share, and I can about stuff that I knew I could talk about or facilitate because of my experience. But I'm totally happy and would love to have it mostly be community discussion instead of just me yapping at everybody. So feel free to look at the different kind of topics or bring your own ideas on foods that you like to make or things that you feel make life better. I'm really happy to have, the goal is to have the meal times be space specifically for that. So thank you everyone who's contributing to making that a reality.